My name's Paul Bestall. This is Mysteries and Monsters on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Hello and welcome to this week's Mysteries and Monsters. Well, I've had a fantastic time at my first UFO conference in Pontefract this week, which was hosted the Outer Limits magazine's annual bash. It was fantastic to meet so many people I respect in the field of ufology, as well as meeting in person some of the fantastic guests I've been lucky enough to interview so far. I also met today's guest, UFO researcher and the man behind UFOnly, Jason Gleaves. We also had talks from Stefanos Panagiotakis, Spiros Melania, Philip Kinsella, Paul Sinclair, Malcolm Robinson, and the premiere of a brilliant new documentary about Calvin Parker and the Pascagoula case. I also got to touch a piece of British UFO history as Malcolm Robinson fetched the actual trousers which were worn by Bob Taylor, who was a Scottish forestry worker allegedly attacked by a UFO in 1979. And is still the only UFO case in the UK that was fully and seriously investigated by the police. Philip Mantle and Malcolm also received well-deserved awards celebrating their long careers in ufology, and we have to give a big thanks and congratulations to Chris Evers, who was the host and organiser of the event and the main man behind Outer Limits magazine. Well, back to Mysteries and Monsters. We've finally got the website back on track, so hopefully that'll be launching in the next few weeks. Don't forget you can find us on Facebook and YouTube under Mysteries and Monsters, and we're on Twitter and Instagram as Mystery Monsters. Please rate and review us on whatever podcast app you use. And now, let's speak with today's guest, Jason Gleaves. My guest tonight on Mystery and Monsters is author, researcher and investigator Jason Gleaves. Jason has served in the Royal Air Force as well as working for the British Aerospace Airbus Division. His new book, The UFO Umbrella, follows his first book, UFO Photo. This one subjectively opens up the topic of close encounters and looks at them with more detail in a fascinating compendium of cases. Jason, we're delighted to welcome you to Mysteries and Monsters today. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for the invite.
Oh, you're very welcome. So, this is your second book. Really interesting subject, I found. But what was it that captured your imagination in regards to moving into the field of ufology, Jason? What's got you this into it that you're pushing yourself to release such books as you are?
Well, it sort of goes back to when I was in my childhood, my first encounter with my sister, aged 7 years old, and that was over near Aintree Racecourse in Liverpool. Mm-hmm. And well, we were playing quite happily. My sister's a year older than me, and there was a bright light outside the bedroom window, and it took us both by surprise. And we saw this, and when we looked, it was a large silver disc-shaped object. And then it took off at high velocity, and we just carried on playing like nothing had happened. Literally, yeah.
There is something refreshing about the way children deal with these kind of incidents, Jason. Whichever kind of field it is, whether it's ufology or paranormal, children just seem rather blasé about things, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And like I said, I'd forgotten about it completely. It was only probably a couple of years ago when I sort of got into this field in more depth than I actually was. And she sort of reminded me of it, and it sort of came back to me what had happened, and I said, oh yeah. She said, don't you remember seeing that object outside the window? And one thing led to another, and it snowballed, and yeah, it sort of went from there.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting because growing up, there was a couple of friends of mine who witnessed something similar, and one of them had essentially just completely forgotten about the incident, despite it happening. They watched this thing for about an hour, and until it was brought up randomly in a conversation, and it was almost as if somebody had opened up something he'd completely forgotten about. It was extremely peculiar.
It just sounds like a trigger. It's some sort of trigger that like you say, it's something that brings out and it triggers that memory of what happened.
Yeah. Do you think it's because it's sometimes very difficult to comprehend that for some people their brain just kind of goes, no, we're not dealing with that. We're just going to put that there.
Yeah, it could be that, or if you're going into the side of abductions and extraterrestrial abductions. I mean, that's part of what they actually say is that the person being abducted isn't supposed to remember anything. So,
yeah. I mean, that's something I've often found interesting about encounters with lost time and things like that, Jason, is that it sometimes takes reoccurring dreams or like you say, a trigger conversation or something like that for some people, it just opens the floodgates for them.
Yeah. And well, not just as a young child. I mean, throughout my childhood, I've always loved watching, science fiction, Doctor Who, and all that type of thing. Space 1999, and then it sort of led on to Star Wars, and so I've always been hooked on science fiction as well.
Yeah. Well, me and you are of the same generation, so I completely agree with where you're coming from there. That was, that's the majority of my teenage years were delving into a variety of weird and wonderful science fiction films from around the world. So,
yeah.
I mean, obviously, as you refer to, it was the fact that your sister brought up in conversation about what happened to you both.
Mm-hmm.
But to go from being interested in the subject to actually diving into it as an author. What was the catalyst for that? Was it through your experience in the RAF, or did you just find some kind of thirst for this, Jason, that you thought, I've got to get this out there to a wider audience?
Yeah, it sort of led on really from that. Like I said, I was watching Arthur C. Clarke, and it, do you remember that Mysterious World he used to have out? And yeah,
absolutely. I could bore people for hours, Jason, talking about my favourite episodes of that. But yeah, carry on. Sir.
Yeah, and like I said, Unexplained magazines, and it just everything snowballed. And a funny thing, people that contact me who have experiences and also they want images analysed and things like that. I mean, one of the main things people do talk about is that feeling mad about wanting more information, having to try and dig out more and more and watch more YouTube channels and videos of, ETs and everything related to that. And the one thing, what I actually call it myself, is the Richard Dreyfuss syndrome, where it's off the Close Encounters film, where the character Richard Dreyfuss plays, when he goes insane and mad because he doesn't know why he's been contacted by ETs, and so that's why I see it really. And then sort of leading on anyway, like we said before, probably was my military experiences and things like that, other things that have happened, which sort of I wanted to know more questions or more answers.
Yeah, very much so. I think it is very interesting that, as you refer to the character Richard Dreyfuss plays in Close Encounters, he does seem to. I mean, obviously Spielberg did do a lot of investigation in regards to abductee stories and their reactions to in the aftermath of how they felt. It does seem quite remarkable in the majority of cases, without wishing to cast aspersions on certain witnesses. There are some that seem more believable than others for me, Jason, because there seems to be a real negative emotional response to what's happened to the individual that's claiming to have been abducted in some way.
Yeah, definitely. You do get a reoccurrence of the same thing being mentioned about abductions and what happens to people taken on a craft, etc. Examined by greys. You can go down that road, but in everything there are good and bad. And people have had bad experiences, people have had good experiences. Children right through to old people, all ages. And it's just a common theme that a lot of the experience, well, what people say are the same thing.
Yeah, it often strikes me as unusual that certain cases tend to get more publicity for a number of reasons, really. But because it's probably more common, these more well-known cases are probably the tip of the iceberg for some areas, aren't they?
Oh yeah. Well, everybody who falls into the rabbit hole as such, where they want to find out more about ufology and the community as a whole. They always seem to go down the same initial path, really. They want to know about the ships, the shapes of the ships, the different types of UFOs, and then sightings, and then slowly within all this you'll get the fakes that are sort of in with the real, if you know what I mean. The images and the stories, and then there are people that are probably trying to make money out of it as well.
Absolutely. Well, where there's mystery, there's usually money, I've found, especially these days on YouTube, Jason.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
So, I mean, for me, I think the first case I kind of came across where I didn't understand why more people were asking questions was a chap from Canada called Stephen Michalik, and he had an encounter whilst he was in the woods somewhere, and he ended up with some kind of circular pattern across his stomach.
Right.
And the excuse given was an acid burn, and I just thought the whole story seemed very unusual. It was a really weird connection of events. He felt a bit funny before he saw it, then he saw it, and then something happened, lights went off, and he came round with this burn across his stomach. What was in that kind of situation? Did you come across a case that you had that kind of light bulb moment when you thought, why aren't more people talking about this?
Well, there are plenty of cases and plenty of examples where people are left with marks, indentations, I'm trying to think of the word now. The sort of scoop marks within the skin, and left with triangular-shaped burn marks or circular. There was one case that I haven't actually put out really, but it was a lady who contacted me from Hungary, and she lived out in the sticks where there are two villages. I don't really want to say the places, but the two villages anyway, and the two villages never really mixed with each other, and it goes back a long way over many years. And in one of the villages, somebody had come forward to this ufologist in Hungary, saying that they had a red circle mark on their arm, which was like cross-haired, like a target sort of mark on their arm. Long story short, in the next village, another case had appeared where a woman of similar age and everything else come forward with exactly the same mark on her arm as the other lady did, and they didn't know each other. So, it's something that's pretty unique, really. And people with other marks as well, other cases where after abductions they'll have the triangle mark on their stomach, or, circular again, it looks like a burn mark.
Yeah, it is remarkable. Obviously the pictures of the victim in Hungary, they're quite unusual as well, because the thing that struck me when I saw that image is that they're quite uneven, whereas there seems to be in other cases there's quite a uniformity to the injury. Do you know what I mean? That's what struck me about it, Jason.
Yeah, Yeah, and then you can go on the other side. I've got a friend of mine, Jay Matthews. He writes for Ufology UK. He's the admin for the page on Facebook, and he had an experience where he had numbers on him imprinted on his back, and they had different figures, and as if they were burnt into his skin. So again, but that could come under sort of my lab type of thing, where that's a military side, which I believe is a military side, abduction to an extraterrestrial. Then again, people say ETs work with the military, so
Well, yes, that's been with us for a long time, and it seems to obviously gained a lot of traction over the last sort of 10 years. But I know when you were talking there, you referred to the triangular case, and once again, that's extremely unusual because it was a father and son, I believe.
That was it, yeah. Yeah.
And it's just like a triangular rash around their belly button.
That's it. That didn't actually appear until a day or so afterwards.
Yeah.
So again, it's I think he was a doctor, if I remember rightly, on the case, and it was a very detailed account where they saw the two disc-shaped objects coming in over the valley, lighting up the house, everything, and he also down to it. He had an injury from when he fought in the war, and it actually repaired his injury on his leg. So but as you said, the two markings left on the body of the father and the son were triangular, weren't they, on his belly?
Yeah, it's a very striking. Like I say, there often is something unusually uniformed about these people's injuries for me, Jason, and that's, like I say, it's unusual because it's not the kind of thing that's easily explainable. Obviously a rash is a rash, but I've never seen a rash that's as large as they are and as triangular, and to affect both father and son in the same area.
Yeah, and they're especially around the navel area, aren't they? So again, that goes back to where people have been abducted and they've had experiences saying that something went into their navel area, whether implant or something taken out. So possibly they'd had something done to them.
Yeah, and as you refer to, the other thing that strikes me about that story is that he'd got an injury from his time serving in the Algerian War. Mm-hmm. And he had obviously a positive reaction. It essentially cleared up.
Yeah, it repaired.
And I think that's something there seem to be more stories of that nature probably when we were growing up as teenagers, Jason. It's not something that often gets mentioned in these cases these days. Do you think, or do you think it's just that certain cases don't get the prominence and there are still these positive physical reactions to a situation as well?
I don't think they're actually brought up as much, like you say, as in the public domain. To say that this happened. But if you look at certain cases that have been documented, that people say that things that have happened to them, like that person who had his leg fixed or repaired. Other things have happened as well along the line where the people don't get sick or they don't get colds, after they've been abducted. They don't seem to get ill with anything. So whether your makeup, your DNA's been changed, it could be down to that too. Yeah,
it's one of those things that you hark back to, and those stories. It seems as if there has to be a more emotional response these days. There's not this kind of positivity. Everybody's worried. There's a lot of stereotyping goes on with these kind of cases these days.
Yeah, a lot of stigma attached. Well, in the early days, I'd say the stigma attached, but not so more now with, especially with the things that are happening in America, especially where they're coming forward to the Stars Academy, the Tic Tac UFO, and it's gone into the mainstream media.
Yeah.
So, and Luis Elizondo and Tom DeLonge, etc., all that, this high, status people coming out into ufology and sort of raising the stakes sort of thing in the field itself.
Yeah, I have to say, I found it very odd what's been happening the last couple of years. Since the article appeared that I think Leslie Keane was one of the authors of.
Yeah.
And from that point, I think that was December 2017, from that point on, Jason, it just seems like, especially in America, it's been, the whole subject's been looked at in a completely different light.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I had this conversation with a couple of friends at the Awakening conference in Manchester recently, and it was similar things that saying how ufology has changed so much just within the last year alone. Especially you see the type of people that come to the conferences. The more people waking up to what's happening around the world, with sightings as well. So it's definitely changing for the better as well.
I mean, when I saw that footage, I have to be honest, it blew me away. And more so because of the audio from the pilots, I think.
Yeah, it's good footage, but I do think there is better quality footage out there that hasn't been brought forward. A lot of people are sitting on the fence to the Stars Academy at the minute because, especially with the misunderstanding with the unidentified balloon that they said they come forward and said that it was a UFO when it was clearly a helium party balloon or whatever.
Yeah.
But the only thing that there's that. But the only thing that really niggles me with being ex-military, when you actually look at the footage of the hood, the camera footage of the jet fighter, if you actually look down the right-hand side with all the writing round, you've got the altitude and the speed and everything of the aircraft, but down the side, the right-hand side, there's the word, you can see the word slave wrote.
Yeah.
Now, the only thing with me, military terms, the word slave is another word or name for drone.
Yeah.
So that's one little alarm bell for me, and I do think, again, there's a lot better footage out there that they could have come forward with, and especially one of the pieces of footage. I think there's 3 up to now, isn't there?
Yeah.
That they've released, but one of them was already released in 2012 or 14 or something. So you can only really class that as 2.
Yeah, because that did surprise me, because when it came back out, I was like, I'm sure it's one of them things where you think, have I really seen this before?
Yeah.
So that did strike me as peculiar. But I mean, like you say, I think we are wise to sit on the fence for the time, because there's, with the greatest respect, there's been as impressive as that footage was, and as you rightly point out, there are questions to certain aspects of it.
Definitely.
It was still impressive. And the fact that the US Navy just didn't really challenge it, I found unusual as well. Because normally, we all know what they are. The weather balloons, Jason.
That's it, or swamp gas.
The classic two explanations. It always makes me chuckle. And especially swamp gas. It doesn't matter what subject I'm reading about online. If there's some comments and people say, "Oh yeah, it's this," someone always says, "Doesn't matter if it's Bigfoot or whatever, it's swamp gas," all the time, and it still makes me smile. Yeah.
It does. It actually does with myself. Yeah, when I hear it, but yeah, I think you have to sit on the fence with this footage, especially coming out of the States, and the way it's a drip feed thing, towards disclosure, because disclosure is going to come. It's going to come whether it's tomorrow or if it's going to be 20, 30 years down the line. It's going to come. And how it it's how the governments want to give up their grip on everything, because again, if ET landed tomorrow and the world changes, people will start to ask questions about fuel and gas, and we don't need petrol, gas, that sort of fuel. Things can run on free energy devices, etc. So yeah, it just opens a can of worms, and they're probably looking how they can handle all this.
I think whichever intention anybody turns up with, Jason, the world will never be the same, regardless.
No.
From that moment on, that moment alone, like you say, and the ramifications are incredible. Which directions it could send a variety of situations. Most of them, as you point out, they're quite into dangerous territory, I suggest.
That's it.
But the other thing about all this is that over the years, you look at somebody's, for example, Chile, who have been extremely open and positive about their own UFO investigations, to the fact that in an official capacity they recognise UFOs as an actual physical being. Do you find it unusual that it's taken this to come out from the States for it to kind of push it into a more serious conversation?
Yes and no. More towards America seem to have the leading hand on a lot of things. So, a lot of people will sit up and take notice if it comes from, like you say, the way it's been discussed openly on, Fox News and things like that, which is mainstream news. It's things have been mentioned over here on the BBC. Little drip feed things. That will slowly introduce, and then also the release of the new Space Force. Which they've already got the Army, the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Coast Guard. So the way President Trump brought out this statement about the Space Force, when we all know in ufology generally, that there's been a Space Force for a long time, especially going back as well to Gary McKinnon, the Brit, who accidentally purposely hacked into the NASA. It's been there for a long time, and obviously a lot of the UFOs, I do also think, are military or secret covert craft. And again, that's a good cover for the military, because if somebody comes out and says that they've seen a UFO and it's been one of their craft, that's the perfect cover story for them anyway. So
yeah, absolutely, and it certainly it takes you back to the days of the B-52 flying around, and didn't exist. People were seeing those for a good 10 years before they were officially recognised by the government. So it's, as you refer to there, Space Force. I had a little chuckle when Space Force was mentioned, because it took me back to probably the only other president that I can remember saying anything that made me think hello, was when Ronald Reagan once made a speech where he talked about threats from out of this world.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's all part of the drip feed effect. To give people this thing in their mind, and they say it often enough, it becomes true, and if they become the threat, when are they really going to be the threat? Who knows? But got to remember also with America, with the Space Force, they already had a program in the 50s and the 60s. And they just America want dominance in space, really, just like the USSR, Russia. It's always been like that over the years. So, yeah.
It does seem that there's a lot going on, not just in ufology, but a lot going on in space travel and exploration, and obviously everything that's going on with Mars. It seems like we're about to enter a new golden era, I think, Jason.
Yeah, definitely. Well, like you say, the disclosure era, especially when all hell breaks loose and the cat's out the bag, as we say.
Yeah, like you say, going as in your book, there are so many cases where, the usual skeptical response to this is, well, show me the evidence. Where's the evidence? And your book is chock full of cases from a variety, because as you refer to in your introduction, you introduced the Hynek scale, with the additional 4 subsections.
That's it. Yeah.
And yet there are compelling stories and witnesses and physical responses that you document in each of those 7 categories. Do you still find it astounding, surprising, or are you just used to the official response to these individuals?
Do you mean the government or the official responses?
Government first.
Yeah. Well, it's always been a standard answer, hasn't it? And the same with NASA. That's why it's never a straight answer with NASA. It's other things have been going on. They've been witnessing craft objects that they don't even know what they are. But I don't know why they haven't come forward and told it, or given out the information to the masses. With ufology, I just see it as a huge jigsaw puzzle, and we're all putting the pieces together from all different aspects of ufology. That was really why I called the book the Ufology Umbrella, because that's the way I see ufology generally today. It's like a huge umbrella, and it just cascades off into hundreds of different subcategories off that, like abduction, sightings, cow mutilations, animal mutilations. It just goes off, and one thing just seems to spark another 5 questions, or and then you have to look for the answers for that, and then when people really want to know what's going on, you just got to go down the basics, really. I mean, the first book was about analysing, which I do, is analysing images of UFOs and how I do it. And, generally when people approach me, I just wanted to show it's not a secret what I do. Anyone can do what I actually do. It's just I want people to see that they can do this for themselves. And then the second book really led on to follow on from the first book, a sort of DIY to ufology, because the amount of questions you get asked, they're only the same sort of questions I was asking in the early days of me actually getting into this, murky world of ufology. So I wanted people just to have, basically they could look it up and just see basic things for themselves, and then they can go out onto the internet and look at books and do their own research, and then, come up with their own truth that they can sort of go on with.
Yeah. I mean, how have you found it? Because I know a very knowledgeable, intelligent, articulate, investigative UFO enthusiast in the States, and he near enough flatly refuses to accept any digital imagery as evidence, because he says it's just far too easy to manipulate now.
Well, that's a bit of a cop-out, really. I see ufology with the digital element coming into it as a double-edged sword, really, because you've got the images before digital cameras were available, or, vastly available to everybody. They're more of a better thing to analyse, because if you call it fake at the time, they were generally put onto pieces of glass and put in front of cameras, those sort of things. Yeah. But obviously when digital came in the early days, you've got the second problem now, where when you try to analyse photographs, you get the digitization, the pixelation in photographs. So if you try and blow something up, so you can get that, and it is easy to manipulate. People have been proven to put fake imagery out there, and probably it's to make money or whatever reason. I don't really get into that side of it, because I'll go off a hunch, really, when I first see a if I see certain images, you can generally tell roughly yourself from the early stages if it's not a fake, but if it's a known object. So it's a bird or a plane or some sort of weather phenomenon. You can generally get that. But then you'll go further again if you think it's the hello photograph. You look at it and then you go. Then the research head comes on, so you'll look at the person, you'll ask about the person, where they live, etc. And then you go deeper. Are there any airports local? What are the flight paths? What's the weather like there? So you go into an awful lot of things really in a case. And at the end of the day, you can come back with nothing at the end of it, because you actually come back with the answer to what the image is. I mean, in the first book, I did start the book off with a case where I was approached through Philip Mantle. He often comes to me with images as well. And he'd have been approached by I think it was a Brazilian airline pilot, a civilian airline pilot. And he'd been on holiday in Wiltshire. And the two images I was sent were, one was a big open sky, and there was an object at the bottom which looked disc-shaped when you look at it initially. And the second image was of a Union Jack flagpole. Again, that was the centre of the photograph, but either side of the flagpole you could see two disc-shaped objects. And I put this in the book. You can see it in the book for yourself. And then I did the usual thing where I'll upscale a photograph first, blow it up the best I can without losing the pixelation. I'll go through all the different processes, just like I do with all my photographs. And long story short, when I actually blew in and used filters, you could see they were military aircraft. There were two. One was a Tornado, and I think one was an Intruder, one of the American aircrafts. And again, being ex-military, I can identify aircraft quite easily. But you could see the outline, and I actually put in a photograph, overlaid of what that object was. But he was a trained airline pilot. He's trained to see things, and and he, even he got it wrong, and I can get it wrong as well.
You're listening to Mysteries and Monsters on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Yeah, I think that's the thing as well. I always find it refreshing, Jason, because my love of these subjects is initially based on a healthy dose of skepticism, because I have learned over the years to never accept anything on face value. There has been in numerous fields, Jason. There are countless, as you referred to earlier, hoaxes and exaggerations and pareidolia. If someone tells you, takes a picture of a tree and says, "Can you see Bigfoot?" Right? If you've got to put a circle around it, my answer is usually no these days. But it's very difficult, I think, to express a genuine belief in these phenomena to some people when you base it in skepticism, and I think that's the healthiest thing we can do.
Yeah, I do think that's a really good thing, because again, you've got to have your wits about yourself, but you also go with your gut instinct. There are, and like I said, you can get it wrong just as many things as you can get right. The worst thing I don't like to do is to tell people that the photograph they've sent me they think is a UFO is a bird, or it's a weather phenomenon, or it's an aircraft, and it's quite often. But also, we all want to see that hello photograph. We want to see the perfect, we want to see the perfect UFO photograph. And again, other people would not take anything, like you said, that gentleman before, your friend in America, who won't take any, digital images, etc. Well, that's fine. Some people in ufology will only accept seeing a UFO or saying it's real if it's nuts and bolts, when ufology is so much more than that, because we're talking dimensional ships, we're talking every single shape under the sun that you can think of, from disc-shaped craft, elongated cylindrical shaped craft, circles, ovals, elliptical. You get every single type. But, more now people are seeing the orbs, especially around chemtrails, etc.,
Yeah.
So, yeah, ufology is a funny thing. There's so many different questions and answers, and they're all unanswered, and people are still asking more and more questions.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's always struck me about, by looking at, scepticism, I can think of a personal incident about 5 years ago. It was a lovely summer's day, and something just caught my attention out the corner of my eye in the sky.
Yeah.
And I thought, what on earth is that? And it was just a very unusual shape. And it was going along at a fair old pace. And I thought it didn't look like where I lived at the time, it was near the Peak District, so we were used to the air rescue going over. I grew up on an RAF flight path, so I've seen many a Harrier jump jet flying past. And it didn't see that. And it took about 5 minutes for my eyes to zone in properly to notice it was a massive bouquet of balloons.
Right,
that had
there you go.
escaped, but they'd obviously been in some kind of shape, like a seat or something.
Yeah.
And they were just flying across, and but, like I said, first glance, I had no idea what on earth that was. It just looked very peculiar. So,
well, it was something out of the ordinary for you, wasn't it?
Absolutely, but it's weird as well, because it wasn't that large in my peripheral vision. I think it was just the speed. That caught my eye. It was very odd. But so, in regards to the evidence that you're often given, Jason, how many, roughly, would you say the majority are explainable?
I would say probably 75% plus, give and take, is probably an explainable situation or an object, like we said, birds, weather, aircraft, something, and then it narrows right down then to, well, we think we know what it might be, but we can't confirm, and then you go to the extra small percentage, probably a 5%, where they're just really no idea, because you've checked every avenue, you've contacted people, you've looked for other reports, you've gone down everything that you can. So it just stays, as unexplainable what the object is.
Yeah. Have you found, since the first book, you're getting more imagery sent, Jason, or is it a constant stream these days?
I think more, obviously, because I did have the Facebook page UF Only, where I can't remember, there's about 23,000 people follow on that, so. There are links, and when I post, I must post in God knows how many other web. And I write for the Outer Limits magazine for Chris Evers, and and then the books, and then I've also got the UF Only YouTube channel. So there's a lot of videos on there where really I set that channel up because I was trying to post the videos that I analysed on Facebook, but then they wouldn't let me post them, and so it was easier to put a link through YouTube, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So, more people are approaching, and the same answers are given generally. I do a lot of work for James Gilliland at the SETI Ranch, near Mount Adams.
Yes.
And Peter Maxwell Slattery. I mean, I think I actually did a chapter on them in the book. With some of the imagery I'd done for them, but I do class Peter probably in the top 1% in the world of the images that he sends me to analyse, and of ETs and craft, etc., and experiences. So I'm not saying anybody else is more special or not. I'm just saying they're the ones that I've actually worked on the most.
I mean, it is. I think also as well. Do you think that as we touched on earlier, the whole disclosure and to the Stars Academy? Do you think people are feeling a bit more they've got a bit more faith in getting a serious response.
Yeah, definitely, because like we said before, I think that stigma's gone now. It's been lifted, the veil's been lifted over ufology, because before you were either a nutcase or, the Richard Dreyfuss syndrome, that type of real. No, you're just a nutter with a tinfoil hat,
Yeah.
And now with it being, like we said, on the media and more open, really, and spoken about us, and especially, like I said, the people that are coming to conferences now are people you never saw a couple of years ago. They're all there, and they're all starting to ask those questions like we all did, and they're on their own journeys, because everyone's on a journey. You start at the beginning, you have to go through it yourself to get to the end. You can listen to other people, you can take their advice, you can look at their, photos or their stories, but you're still on your own journey right the way through. It's definitely changing for the better.
Yeah, like as I said to you right at the beginning of our chat, Jason, I found it remarkable the last couple of years. We both grew up at the same time, so we've seen, especially when the mid '90s was a massive explosion in ufology, because obviously we'd started to get more American TV coming over to the UK on more channels, and obviously we got satellite TV, so there were more documentaries and things like that.
Yeah.
It does seem right now, I think we're about to go through that second age of it, really.
Yeah, it's the wake-up age, isn't it? Like we say, a lot more people asking the questions because of the things that are being shown to them on TV, mainstream TV. And again, the YouTube especially has been a brilliant thing for a lot of people, because people can get in ufology especially, you can see conferences from all around the world, different types of speakers for different subjects. Like I said, ufology is that big umbrella, and there are there's probably thousands of speakers that have got their own different part of that jigsaw puzzle. And you can sit and watch to your heart's content and take all that information in as part of your journey to get to the end, or the next level even. But yeah, it's, again, like you say, I just think it's incredible the way things have moved on.
Yeah, I mean, and it's, as I'm sure you and I can both agree on, once you get into that on YouTube, there is a rabbit hole. You good luck at getting out of it, because once you discover your favourite mystery on YouTube, you're just off.
Yeah.
You're away, aren't you?
You are.
It's incredible, and I look at some of the, as we mentioned very briefly about Arthur C. Clarke. Being able to watch them again on YouTube, just takes me back 30 odd years to when I first saw it, and the awe and to be fair, a little bit frightened. I remember the sea monsters episode terrified me, Jason, for weeks. I was made of stern stuff. I was not your average, small child. I loved monsters of all varieties, but that, I think it was the music and the I think they were out in the sea and it was really bad. The whole thing just, oh no. Put me off the water more than Jaws did.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? You never go in the water without hearing that Jaws music behind you.
Absolutely. I still have friends who tell me about when they were kids, they were taken to the cinema to see. I was like, what on earth was going on through people's minds?
They must have sneaked in then.
Good Lord. But yeah, so for you, as you've developed this love over the years, do you find yourself finding more reasons to be positive about the quality of information and imagery you sent, Jason?
Oh yeah. I'm still on my own learning curve. I'm still finding a lot of answers out myself. Things that have happened through my military and civilian life. I'm like everybody else. I want to know. I want to know what's actually out there. I've sort of know what's out there. It's my opinion. And, I tried to put it in books as well, the information I've sourced and found out over the years. I mean, I've got my first public talk coming up in November. I think it's I think it's called Lapis in Blackpool.
Mm.
Um, and I sort of start off, I'll talk about myself, but the first couple of cases I'm going to put forward to people were cases I've investigated and found that they were not fake, but they were misidentified.
Yeah.
And so I want to show people really that, you know, it's a double-edged sword. You know, there are cases and they have been solved, but there are cases that haven't been solved, and there are cases where we think there are this, you know, and really you're giving it back to the person who was watching the talk, what they come up with in their own mind.
Yeah. And I think, to be honest, Jason, that kind of approach gives the solid evidence, or the more hard to explain imagery, far more merit, because you're attacking it in an honest and open way. You're not, for you, like you say, you're hoping it's the hello picture, but you're going into that with the, you know, the experience of knowing it probably isn't.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, again, through all research, if you look through the book, the way I take people on that journey through, you know, I also think everything's linked to the frequency side of sightings. So, you know, again, it goes back to one thing where a lot of musicians have sightings, and I'm talking about well-known musicians, where they've had UFO sightings, and again, I think it's down to the person that they're open to that frequency. You know, and again, the universe is made up of frequency, and it's all everything's linked together. If you actually take one step back, you can actually see that the planets and the way things are and sightings, you know, if they are all linked in some way or another, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it is incredible as well, I think, because when I've spoken to other people who've worked in ufology, there's a kind of positive impact for people that have a UFO experience. So I think it was Dr. Lynn Ketai, Phoenix Lights, and she was on about, for some of the witnesses, there was a very profound emotional change in them as a person after they'd experienced something like this, Jason. It changed them as a person. They became a more caring, conservationist, protection-minded outset that they may not have fully embraced prior to that. Have you, in your work, come across people that have gone through some kind of, well, I suppose you could call it a spiritual awakening?
Yeah, in a way, yeah, and they look at the Earth and the planets and everything around them, nature, in a completely different light. Like you just said, things they haven't seen before, they seem to take more notice of, and they disregard the money and the you know, have owning things, that type of thing, take a back seat. Yeah, it's got to be a more positive way of looking at everything. And also, people that think that way or act that way, they are, well, more tendency, I think, to actually have experiences in the future as well.
Yeah, I just find it a very interesting response, because there seems to be the initial shock and awe and fear in some cases, Jason, and then I think when they've ruminated on the situation, it does seem to really change people's lives for the better.
Yeah, and yeah, I definitely agree. And you know, that can only be better for everybody as well. You know, and the world in general. If everybody looks towards that singular, you know, goal in everything, it's got to be a better place to live for a start.
Absolutely. And to be fair, if it, you know, I'm for more people seeing them if it has this effect on them. To be fair, I think we could do with a lot more kind, caring people out there pulling together for, you know, regardless of where we're from. For everyone's concerned. So, through your work, Jason, has anything changed in you? Have you kind of gone through any sort of transformation in regards to how you view the subject, or has it made you more cynical to certain things? Have you got a change in your outlook?
Yeah, it's going to affect me like it does everybody else who gets into it. I can, I can go out and sky watch. I've just been to the a campsite in North Wales with Tony Topping.
Yep.
And there was a big group there, a tribal. I can't remember the name, top of my head at the minute, but it was in North Wales anyway. And we did a sky watch, and on the night alone, we must have seen over 20 different objects in the sky. I say UFOs, but I didn't actually look at a chart to say that they were satellites, but they were coming from all different directions. Yeah. I think I'm a better person, definitely, for getting into this field. More to the fact that I'm finding out more and answers that I've been longing to find the answers to for a long time. And I'm also glad that I can help other people that come to me, because there's an awful lot of people that come to me through the site that I don't come forward with their name because they don't want to be, their name put forward with their case or anything. But if people just generally want to see what they see on a photograph, they want the answers themselves, and I'm willing to do that forever and a day for anybody that comes forward.
I mean, that's something I think is often forgotten in regards to this whole situation, Jason, is the psychological effects that these experiences have on people. Because who do they talk to? What can they say to people? Because obviously we've mentioned it several times about the change in the recent attitude, but we're not. We're talking about a very recent change in the official interpretation of this evidence. It's still not that comfortable a subject to open up with at work and say, "Oh, you'll never believe what I saw last night."
No, I agree. It's probably not with people. We say this is people waking up to what's actually going on in the world in general. So it's not necessarily just UFOs or experiences. It's probably waking up to, why are we being screwed over with, regards to petrol and gas and, the economy in general. And so you're waking up to that side of it, but there are also the waking up to the ufology side. And, again, like you just said, in work, if you're talking to somebody in work and you say, I saw this, it's quite often funny that you will actually mention something that happened or an experience, and that person has had something similar in their life, or a family member that they know has mentioned something in relation to seeing a ghost or an experience the same. So you're quite surprised, really. But I do understand, like you just said, most people that you would speak to in work wouldn't even consider going into this subject at all.
Oh yeah, I mean, to be fair, once you come out as a lover of weird things in an office environment, Jason, I can assure you, everybody comes to tell you about whatever weird thing they've seen, heard, grandma's seen, and I find it quite good. I had a very interesting conversation with a work colleague the other day who was telling me about her experiences with the old hag ghost syndrome, sleep paralysis, completely out of the blue. And I thought, and that was entirely down because she knew if she wanted to talk to anybody about something weird, I'd listen.
Yeah,
so
it would come out. Yeah,
it kind of opens you into it, but it's a far better conversation than talking about what's on the television. I'll tell you that, mate.
Yeah, what was on the last night's soap? So, yeah,
very true. So, in regards to you, Jason, obviously, you've clearly come a long way in the last couple of years with the books and like. Where do you see yourself going next? What would you like to concentrate on going forwards?
I'd certainly like to continue with the Facebook page and things like that, because that's where it all really started. And again, helping people if anybody ever wants me to analyze photographs for them, I certainly will do. They might have a bit of a wait if people contacted me to do it, but I don't charge anybody anything. I never will charge anybody. I'll help anybody, and if I don't know the answers to something, I certainly know somebody who in the world of ufology that probably help them out. Again, I'm going to have my first public talk. I've already given one talk at the SETI Ranch, but that was via Skype about a year ago. But this will be my first stand-up public talk. Quite nervy, really, thinking about it. But I think it's the next step for me, really. I'd like to show people the information that I've gathered. I'd like to show them and they can make their own mind up through a presentation. But like I said, if I do write any more books, I'd like them to be informative to people so they can generally, get the gist of what's going on.
Yeah. And what I have found interesting as well, Jason, is that you're clearly getting some interesting evidence from some really well-known researchers these days, as well as general members of the public. Obviously, have you? Now I might have got this wrong. Have you been received anything from Paul Sinclair and his wonderful Truth Proof books?
I've had a lot to do with Paul. He's a great guy. I class him as probably one of our best on the ground researchers. Paul's never happier than when he's in a field or he's doing what he loves to do on the ground. He's a great speaker and he puts some great books out, etc. But if he likes to be researching, that's Paul. There was a case that he had a while ago. I'm going to actually talk about it in my talk. That's how actually I came across Paul first. Where he contacted me, where he'd actually had an experience in his house. Which on his front cover, I did actually do his second cover for him on Proof.
Oh yeah.
Truth Proof 2, I think it was.
Yeah.
But if you actually see on the front cover, there's a picture of a grey alien on the front. Well, that was part of the images. He had an experience in his house where he kept getting lights and paranormal things happening. So he set up a motion camera in his hallway. And the images he sent me were just amazing, really. They were just this light being or something of a grey. And again, you'd have to see them, really. I think he's actually got the photos on his own page and web, etc.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I've only just got the third one. I read the first two in about a week because it. I think I heard him on Howard Hughes' Unexplained. A couple of years ago, and it was just really, especially as a Yorkshireman, because it's not that far away. And I just thought, this is just really weird. It was just really compelling stuff.
Yeah, the cases he doesn't just. That's why I regard him in such a high esteem of what he does, because he doesn't just take cases. He'll turn them inside out and go and interview people on the ground, and he'll talk to people that we would probably not think important to the case. He just doesn't leave any stone unturned. Like I said, he's happier than when he's actually in a field. So
absolutely, yeah. He's got a voracious appetite for information.
Yeah,
and I think we're the better for it because they're fantastic books. So, Jason, I want to just say thank you again for joining me this evening. It's been a fabulous conversation.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Where can everybody find your work and follow you online?
Yeah, well, anyone can get hold of me, again, like I said, if they want any analyze imagery done of the photographs, or, if I can help them in any way on my Facebook, Twitter pages, UF Only. They can also see videos that I do. I've analysed cases on UF Only YouTube. And my two books, my first book, UFO Photo, and the second book, the Ufology Umbrella, are both available on Amazon, and also through Philip Mantle's, who's my publisher, Flying Disc Press.
Brilliant.
So.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Well, listen, I can't recommend the book high enough. It's a great read. It's compelling stuff. Right up my street, Jason. So congratulations on it. And all power to you. And once again, thank you for your time today. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you.